When I first moved into the garden that 4 years later I'm now moving out of to start my epic urban homestead, I wanted something nice and modular. So I created a really simple raised bed and created a video about it called How to Build Cheap DIY Raised Garden Beds in Under 30 Minutes. Now I still stand by a lot of the advice in this video, but looking back from 4 years of gardening experience, I wanted to take you on a bit of a reminisce and see what I would change to give you that insight to improve your raised bed garden. So let's crack the video open, but before we do that, cultivate that like button for 20 years of epic raised bed harvests, and let's get into my old video. Okay, the moment of truth. It's crazy to even just see how far the video itself has come, but let's go ahead and play it.
6 cubic feet of soil, 2 2-foot and 2 6-foot 2x6s, and planter blocks is all we need for this project.
Okay, so right off the bat, that is technically true. That's all you really need for this project. I wanted something that was no screws, no nails, no construction, a renter's garden, because I didn't know how long I was going to be in the space. So I think that's completely fine. Although I will say, just right out of the gate, you can get away with a 6-inch raised bed. That's about as small as you can get away with, but you need really high quality soil to get away with that because there's just simply less for the plant to draw nutrition from. So if I was gonna do a 6-inch tall raised bed, I would put in the absolute best soil I could possibly find, either at the big box store if I'm buying bagged, or at a local nursery if I'm buying bagged, or just mixing a really high quality soil. So these days, I actually go with more of a 12-inch to 18, all the way up to a 30-inch raised bed, because number one, it's easier to work in, and number two, you can actually get a big bulk of soil and have a more stable ecosystem in that raised bed. Okay, let's get back into it.
All right, the first thing we're gonna do is just lay out the planter blocks. So these things have 2-inch slots.
Yeah, so these planter blocks, which I think you can find at a Home Depot or any big box store, it's really nice because you can use them as is, or you can stack them and create multiple tiers of gardens. But what's really nice about them is, let's say you have a funky space, like you're growing in a small side yard that the standard pieces of lumber just aren't really working for. Well, you can just create almost like an erector set or a Lego style layout. If you need to go around a corner, you just get a couple extra planter blocks and fit it in. So they're really modular. And again, you don't have to screw anything together.
If you just feed in the 2x6s and you pretty much don't need to use anything at all. You've got no nails, no glue, no nothing. I just put
First of all, my outfit here, barefoot, white sweat shorts and white shirt is like probably the worst attire you could build a raised bed in. So do not follow my advice on that.
Together in about a minute or so. It's super transportable.
Okay, so in this video, I'm using a garden soil product. And so back then, I just picked random things from the store. I didn't really know the exact difference between these all. I knew that the garden soil had to be amended. So garden soil is not really up to par with, let's say, a raised bed mix, in my opinion, if you see it sold at the garden center. So you'll have like topsoil, which really you shouldn't use for raised beds, at least not exclusively. Then you get garden soil, and then you get these raised bed style mixes that are really well prepared, in my opinion. So if I was only using one bag, one style of product, I would go with a raised bed mix. Like Espoma Organics raised bed mix is the one that's been my go-to lately, and I absolutely love it. But again, you can make your own mix. And in that case, what you would do is you'd go with maybe 1/3 of a perlite vermiculite or rice hull style product for drainage and aeration. You'd go with 1/3 coconut coir style product for water retention. And then you'd go with a bunch of different blended sources of compost as your final third.
Super portable. It's really, really good to use in a quick situation. All right, so I'm adding the 6 cubic feet of soil right now, smoothing it out, just making sure that it's level everywhere. And I'm gonna get all the clumps out of the soil. So I didn't buy the highest quality soil. I know some of you might be saying that in the comments.
So I apparently I already knew this when I was making the video, but yeah, I mean, if I was doing this again and using that exact soil, what I would do is I would dump the best compost I could find in as well. And so you could do a mixture like this with garden soil if you put in a ton of high quality compost, maybe some worm castings, maybe some mycorrhizal fungal inoculants, things like that to really liven up and add some more organic matter.
But it's not a big deal. I'm going to be amending this over time. So I'm just smoothing it out right now before I go ahead and lay down.
Another mistake I'm seeing here is what you're noticing is I already have a pretty small raised bed, 6 inches or so. If I have only 6 inches, I should be filling that to the absolute brim. I think what happened in this video is I just underbought my soil, and so I didn't want to go back to the store, so I just ended up shooting the video as is. But you really want to fill your raised beds up to about an inch below the very top, and that final inch you can use mulch.
Wires. So what I'm doing here is I'm just measuring 1 foot increments and drawing a little dot, because what you'll see in a second is I'm going to be nailing in some nails.
So this is totally optional. This is a square foot gardening style approach to setting up a raised bed. So I made 1 foot increment markers and I drove in some nails, which you'll see in a second here. And what I'm doing there is I'm just creating a grid style layout so I can visually divide my bed so that I can plant according to the square foot gardening plan. Now these days I just eyeball it and/or I do my own style density planting, but it's a really effective method. And actually I mentored under Mel Bartholomew. So, I always like to pay homage to the man who kind of took me under his wing and taught me how to garden. So his book, Square Foot Gardening, is one of the best books on gardening.
Now I don't nail them in all the way. I nail them in halfway because I'm creating a 2 foot by 6 foot grid so I can plant in this raised bed a little bit easier.
Let's check out how I transplant.
15 minutes. Right now I'm doing spinach, and spinach in the square foot gardening method, you use 4 per square foot. So I'm just transplanting it.
There's nothing necessarily that wrong here, except for that I'm transplanting into too shallow of a raised bed with not the highest quality soil. So again, I should have filled it up. I should have put more compost in, and I should have perhaps even teased the roots out just a little bit more. I don't think those were too root bound, but another thing you can do is, if it is root bound, really tear those roots out a little bit, because you don't want them growing in a circle in this new soil that you're transplanting into. These days, especially if I'm working in new beds, I like to also put a little mycorrhizal fungal inoculant, which is basically just a way to liven up that soil, create a beneficial relationship with the roots and the mycorrhizal fungi, which really help extract even more nutrients into the plants.
Real quick, packing them back in, and I'm gonna move on. I've got spinach, chard, and everything in the video description. So if you like this,
yeah, so that's pretty much the video. It's a pretty simple guide. And again, a lot of people have used this video to get their very first garden off. And there's not a whole lot of changes. If I was gonna do this bed again, what I would do is I'd probably double up on the planter blocks. And so I'd build a 12-inch tall garden. I'd fill it to the brim, probably with a custom mix of soil, because buying bagged for a 12-inch tall by let's see, 2 by 6, I think I have here. So that's what? 12 cubic feet of soil. Can be a little bit expensive if you buy the bag mix, but if you do it in components, it can be a little cheaper. So those are some things I would change. I like looking back and seeing how far I've come, and that's the whole point. As gardeners, and really in general in life, we're not so much looking to become experts, but we're looking to become less beginner, is the way to put it. Making less mistakes instead of making more right calls, right? That's kind of how I look at life in general. I like to be less wrong rather than more right. I find if you focus on avoiding mistakes and really correcting errors, you magically become more right, and you magically become an epic gardener. So I hope you guys enjoyed this style of video. It was fun looking back on old school Kevin from 2016. Hope you enjoyed it. Good luck in the garden and keep on growing.